broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
That's a great opening.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's WilmsFront featured interview show. The date is Thursday, the 18th of November, 2021. We are live, as always, on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channels, as well as for just the show on the Unshackled's Facebook page. It is 9 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, starting a little later tonight since my guest has just come back from his own show. So he's doing a double shift. Michael Gray Griffith, co-founder and co-host of Cafe Locked Out. Michael, welcome to WilmsFront.
Hi, Tim. How you going?
I'm going well. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on because, you've become a phenomena in the second half of 2021 with, I got it the wrong way around originally in my description. I said locked out cafe, but it's actually cafe locked out. But you originally at the beginning, cafe locked down.
Yeah, we started, it was called Cafe Lockdown when we first started it. Then once the lockdown's finished, we changed it to Cafe Locked Out because that's what we are. You know, so Damien and I are both still unvaccinated, so no cafes for us.
Well, it's as the dictator Dan himself said, going from a lockdown to a lock out. And we have it's been a whirlwind 24 hours in Dan's Victoria. It broke late last night that his old Labor factional adversary, who was kicked out of the Labor Party last year after the branch-stacking revelations, Adam Somniak, he announced via an op-ed at the Herald Sun that he was returning to Parliament, showed his vaccine status to vote against the permanent pandemic laws, the pandemic management bill, and that meant that the vote would be tied 2020, and debate was adjourned today.
Yeah, it's and then Catherine, there was a thing came out from Bill Kelty, I think, that Catherine had voted with the government, which was not exactly true, and so basically social media erupted, I think, out of real fear. I think people are really frightened of this bill being passed. And so everyone's on edge. I've never seen our society like ready to implode at any moment, you know.
I tuned in after the op-ed was published, and it was certainly on the steps of Spring Street. There was it was a time to celebrate there. I saw that Rukshan rushed down to film the atmosphere. I went down on Tuesday evening just to get a feel of, and I published my observations and analysis on the Unshackled today. It reminded me, because I'm a big soccer fan, the A-League starts tomorrow night. It reminded me of a soccer atmosphere, lots of obviously cheering when something sensible and factual was said, and obviously a lot of jeering when somebody mentions one of Dan's lines or what he's done over the past 20 months. And there were also the honking honking, what do you call them, devices.
Yeah, I know the one you mean.
Squeezing honking, which are at the soccer as well.
Yeah, it's I actually miss it. I actually really enjoy it because there's people are very open, people are very friendly, people are very passionate, and they're not all like-minded, but it's interesting to have good discussions and I really miss the crowds. So I'm still in lockdown because of my my COVID diagnosis. But I've got a few days to go.
How long have you been COVID positive for?
Wednesday the 10th was when I got tested and came back positive. And it was interesting. I was really interesting to see if it is positive, to actually go, okay, well, let's see what this thing is. You know what I mean? Am I going to die? Am I going to be in hospital with something down my throat, you know, to make me breathe? Or am I not going to have any reaction at all? Am I going to lose my sense of taste and smell? So I was interested to see the journey, you know, and it has been an interesting journey.
How did you, like, have you been tested before? Did you develop symptoms? Is that what triggered you to get a test? I've never been COVID tested, never had.
I had to get tested about a year ago, I think, when one of my plays was on tour, and I was going on tour with it, as I was going to, not that I'm an actor, but I was a part of the production, and it was funded, and we couldn't go unless we were all tested. That was the bureaucrat said there's no way, so that was the first time I got tested. And this time it was like a Monday, I had a really strong fever, and the next day the fever was lessening, and then I thought, okay, and then I thought, okay, let's get tested and see if this is actually it, and it was, or so they say.
Now, I remember vividly all of the hyperbole that was put forward by Gladys and Dan during the past 6 months. Gladys, one of her most famous lines is that if you're COVID positive, you can be healthy in the morning, but be on a ventilator by the evening, which hasn't happened to you yet. Or what is it? You can apparently just die at home from COVID. You can just all of a sudden... And then because
because of your ratings, I suddenly carked it now.
Because they're cutting up all these, performing these autopsies on these dead people who've died suddenly and are finding out that they're COVID positive. I'm sure you heard about the shooting victim in New Zealand who they found when they cut him up during the autopsy, and what is it? Tested him. He was COVID positive and a COVID death.
I hadn't heard that one. There's, look, if I didn't know that COVID existed, if it had never turned up in our lives, this last week, I would have just had a cold. That's it. One day of a bit of the chills, and then a cold. I haven't lost any sense of taste or smell. I haven't. I did, when I was having the fever, I was thinking, I wonder what's going to happen because of the fear the fear porn that we've been through. You're sitting there going, okay, is this how it happens? But once I got past that, you realize, no, it's nothing. I've been sleeping mostly, just taking lots of vitamins, and somehow ivermectin turned up in my letterbox, which is really nice, of a certain fairy godfather. And that was it. And every day I've been getting better. And today, apart from a sporadic cough, I'm fighting fit. In fact, I've been in the past, before I was in the theatre, when I was working for the Man, I used to go to work with worse colds and be full of Codral. Remember the ads, Codral you can soldier on? And I'd be going to work with far worse colds. So I can't believe we've destroyed so much of our culture and are continuing to do it. And basically, welcoming in totalitarianism for a cold.
Well, I got a really bad flu in the winter of 2019, back in the before times. That was a really bad flu season in not just Melbourne, but Australia. And it was so horrendous. I was having like fevered seizures in bed. Probably the outbreak happened in the then Unshackled studio with some of the poor ventilation there at the time, because we all got sick. Most of us who had used that studio, but back in the before times, there was no, was it PCR test for the flu? No, there wasn't a lockdown because there was so many flu cases and deaths. Yet that's all that we've known the past 20 months. It's scary what's going on in Europe, mainland Europe, I should say, as they approach winter with cases ticking up because it's winter. And you have particularly the Irish, Austrian, and Dutch governments all going into various lockdowns or lockouts.
Yeah, there was, I saw something on Telegram just before the show tonight where apparently the police and the army in Austria are joining the protests and refusing to join in the lockdown of the unvaccinated. So, but the thing is, though, you hear these reports coming through, it's very hard to know what's true anymore. Even with these two doctors tonight on, both of them were saying the truth is very hard to find, because that's why you often feel like you're in a war, because the first casualty in a war is the truth. And it's very hard to know who to trust at the moment.
Well, I've been open with my audience that I've been double jabbed with AstraZeneca, which is the viral vector vaccine. I wouldn't take Pfizer or Moderna, the mRNA vaccines. I made my own value judgment about getting the vaccine, but of course I respect everyone's right to, if they want the vaccine, if they don't. I mean, I'm still willing to hang out with my unvaccinated friends, invite them to my home, because that's allowed under the, the new normal that starts tomorrow. It's obviously it's a recommendation that you only hang out and invite people to your home who are fully vaccinated, but I know enough about the vaccines that they're not designed. Well, it's turned out that they can't help us reach herd immunity. It's only what you getting the infection, and you getting natural immunity, that's contributing to herd immunity. All it does, taking the vaccine for an individual, is just lessen the chances that they'll be in hospital, possibly dying, though they don't make you immortal, the vaccines. But of course, there's always there's part of AstraZeneca, it was blood clots. With Pfizer and Moderna, it's myocarditis.
Yeah. Look, it's the only reason I haven't taken it so far is, one, I didn't really feel I needed it. I quite like my immune system. I generally very rarely get sick. And two, I don't like being bullied. And literally, they've been bullying us into taking it now ever since they've started it. And they just keep ramping it up. And a lot of people in the protests, a lot of people are vaccinated, but there's a lot of people, the ones that aren't, a lot of them, one of the issues they have is they don't like being bullied. And it's almost a matter of principle rather than health. So yeah, I'm not a huge one on conspiracies. I know there's I get sent a lot of conspiracy stuff all the time. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But I rather try to see myself as a flathead fish on the bottom of the ocean, looking up at the surface going, what the hell's going on? What are you guys up to? And just trying to see it from there. My interest really lies in the social carnage that is going on. Where I've been before I got sick, I was on the steps most days of Parliament House, just meeting these people who are turning up with their lives destroyed, their businesses destroyed, job losses, ostracized from their family. The one that has remained with me the most was a young girl, a nerdy looking girl, who came for 2 days sitting by herself. And finally, when I spoke to her, she was a chemistry scientist, and she was a month away from graduating and then was going to start a PhD. And she says, I can't do it now because I'm not vaccinated. And her family's basically ostracized her. And she says, everyone just keeps telling me to stop questioning and just take it. But she's a scientist and she has questions. And she's not allowed to ask questions, but she's a scientist. So that's the main reason that she hasn't done it. And so it's really, really interesting, the level of fear, the level of compliance. It's a very, very interesting time.
Yeah, the mandates, they're just as bad and divisive as the lockdowns were. I mean, Victoria has pretty much, if you can't work from home, then you have to take the vaccine to work. And as of tomorrow, the unvaccinated will be locked out of non-essential retail, as well as being locked out of all the other venues that they were previously locked out of. And we had Scott Morrison today, or he finally got some balls and decided to say that we don't want to keep these vaccine mandates, passports in place. He was particularly attacking the state of Queensland over their plan to introduce a vaccinated economy. The only time Scott Morrison seems to get some balls is when there's the backbench begin to put some pressure on him, because we've had two very base senators in Jared Rennick and Alex Antic going to withhold their vote unless the vaccine coercion injury issue is addressed.
Well, I also, from the mandates, like locking out everyone who's not vaccinated, just from an economic point of view, it's crazy. I mean, I know my friend, co-host Damien, was with 6 people after the march the other day in Chinatown, and he was going from restaurant after restaurant. They wouldn't let them in, and yet the restaurants weren't full. Any one of these restaurants could have benefited from having 6 people coming in and ordering maybe $300-400 worth of food, and they can't do it. And so they've already been struggling. They've been locked down. Now they're trying to pay their bills. So you'd wonder, if you were a bit, an entrepreneur, why would you want to set up a business in Melbourne where you've got to police your clients? You could be shut down at any minute. If you make one mistake, some staff member neglects to check someone's vaccine passport, next minute you got a $200,000 or $400,000 fine, whatever it is. I mean, why? I just don't see how the economy benefits, how we benefit socially. And I don't understand the mass hysteria at all, and why it doesn't seem to be able to come to an end, especially as our constitution clearly says that there's no conscription. So it's just actually against the Nuremberg law. It's against international law. It's against and also there's another case came out today, I think, or was it yesterday or the 15th, of that police officer in New South Wales won her case that it's unlawful to mandate. And the government settled out of court, but it's come off that it's unlawful. So, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer. I just seem to be baffled by everything.
I'd have to look into that decision because it sounds interesting. But what we've seen with all of these various court challenges is that despite the arguments put forward that these mandates and orders violate, whether it be the Constitution or the various Charter of Human Rights that are in states and territories, the judiciary end up rubber stamping the decisions of those who appointed them. I mean, Clive Palmer's High Court challenge at the end of last year, challenging WA's hard border, even though our constitution says, I think it's section 92, that the trade, commerce, and intercourse between the states shall be absolutely free. The High Court upheld the WA hard border.
Wasn't that with a 124-page argument about the word absolute or something like that? There was one word in it, and and that's what the judges had done. It was something remarkable. So yeah, it's yeah.
Well, it was. I think they tried to the High Court in that they made a really narrow judgment that the WA Public Health Act doesn't violate the Constitution. And we should also remind our audience about that WA Public Health Act. That act says that they can force vaccinate you against your will, including removing your underwear to do so if they think that's reasonable. There's always these reasonable clauses in these bills. What was one of the amendments that the Three Stooges, crossbenchers, Samantha Ratnam of the Greens, Fiona Patten of the Reason Party, Andy Meddick of the Animal Justice, they inserted that the Premier has to be reasonably satisfied that there's a pandemic in the world, like inserting the reasonableness clause. I mean, in practice, if they're going to declare a pandemic, they're going to do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. These pandemic laws, I mean, I haven't read the whole bill. It's but I had two lawyers on one show that they put forth their real concerns with it, and one of them was born in Romania. She was terrified of it. So she actually got to page 60 and then went in the bathroom and vomited. And then we had the QCs coming out.
Andrea Takagi?
No, Meta someone. Meta. I met her in Geelong at a march, and and she. And so I got her on with Gardi, who's a Jewish lawyer who's been associated with the show briefly, and they got on together, and they were both terrified of it. I mean, Gardi's the son of Auschwitz survivors, and he was really terrified of it. Especially, I mean, habeas corpus is gone. You're just taken away. You're detained for 2 years, no trial, nothing. I mean, it's extraordinary, and I was actually sitting there thinking, is that going to be us? Is he going to get the law passed and then come after, say, 10 or 20, 30 prominent people who are going against the narrative, and then whisk them away, and in doing so, basically silence everybody else, because everyone else will go, oh my God, So yeah, very, very interesting time. Yeah.
It's no exaggeration to say that what has happened over the past 20 months is eerily similar to how the Nazi German regime began, and we've had the Dan apologists say, "Oh, that comparison's offensive." Well, we have a bill before the Parliament which gives the Premier and his health minister to make wide-sweeping public health orders, including arbitrary detention without charge or trial. They're building a quarantine camp, the National Centre for Resilience. We previously had to show our papers to be able to work during lockdowns. And now you have to show your papers or your digital certificate, the 21st century, to go places.
Do anything. I mean, you could be sitting in a cafe and suddenly the police come in and check all your papers. You know what I mean? I mean, we initially, even really early on, before I set up the show, I started talking about the similarities and the slippery slope we were on, and people were outraged that I brought that up, and when they were talking about segregation, I said, this is apartheid. Oh, you don't know what it is. They just absolutely appalled that I would suggest it. And yet here we are. And I know one of the other interesting things is that when the Jews were moved into the ghettos, especially in Poland, even then there was a lot of Jewish people who just refused to believe that what was happening right until, maybe right until it was far too late. So it's I'm not saying that there's going to be death camps now. I'm not, but I'm definitely seeing a rise of totalitarianism and tyranny. I see it. I see a cruelty in society. That the cruelty is becoming the norm. There was one woman posted on Cafe Lockdown that some year 12 student had said, hey, let's have a bully a non-vaxxer day. We all know the students that aren't vaccinated, and the best way to get them vaccinated is to bully them. So let's go bully them. And parents were calling in wanting it taken down, and they wouldn't take it down. And so basically, as long as you're bullying the unvaccinated, it's all fair.
That's appalling. I mean, obviously we've seen lots of online bullying of those who've dissented from Dan's and the official narrative. I mean, Dan has his PR guy 17 bot online all the time, praising the dear leader and urging people who were urging people to dob in anyone who was protesting during lockdown. What was that PR guy said? Save Australia, report a traitor called Crime Stoppers.
Incredible. I mean, it's amazing that he hasn't started building gold-plated statues and sticking them around the suburbs.
I mean, Dan is one of the most menacing politicians that I've ever seen. And it's always perplexed me. How can anyone think that he's a kind, compassionate man where he's always had that mean face at his lectern, finger pointing, and people praise him, but you look at the behaviour of the Dan stands, and there's some of the most vile people that you've come across. Understand why they're attracted to him.
Well, I think in times of duress, certain people really turn to authority figures. When Stalin. There's still people in Russia today who will probably say they miss Stalin, and it's so they look that way. I almost see it like the chickens looking to the farmer for help because there's chickens running around with their heads cut off. And one of the most interesting shows we had was we have this professor on who teaches critical thinking. Now he has to come on with a disguised voice and an avatar, because if the university finds out that he's speaking openly and just about critical thinking and how to critically think your way through this, he'll lose his job. And he's we call him Professor Spike. I think he's going to come on this weekend, and he's very, very interesting about talking in the universities how there's no critical thinking, there's just groupthink. And how basically science now is becoming dogma, and it's a really terrifying time. And I think that's what happened in Nazi Germany, was a lack of critical thinking. People were just wanting to be liked, they wanting to be on the bigger growing group, and they were willing to circumnavigate their morality to get there.
Well, you come from the arts world, which it has the reputation of being very left, but there are those some quietly, some not so quietly, who dissent from a lot of the arts and media and entertainment groupthink. I mean, I've worked with Richard Wollstonecroft, who's been on your show on his report from Tiger Mountain for many years. He's certainly not shy about speaking his mind. He's done regular collaborations with David Thrussell as well, another musician.
Yeah, there are no goat show guys.
So I'll ask for your perspective. Like, obviously, there is the lefty arts reputation, but what's the truth underneath?
Listen, I've never been to art school. I've never had any training like that. I left school very early. I was kicked out for being an agitator, and I was always writing by myself just to stay sane. When I was 30, I think 30 or 31, I went to see my first play, and it was an Irish play, and I was really moved by it, and I thought I'd like to give playwriting a go, and basically I came to Melbourne to try to be a playwright. Then I was doing very well, and then I got an actress, my partner, pregnant, and so because I'm a working class boy, I took some time off to raise a family. Once they were in their teens, I decided to go back to what I loved, which was theatre, and I started writing about life as I saw it, and very, very quickly, I was actually an independent playwright living off my plays, and I didn't want to call myself a playwright until that was my living. And so I was earning enough that I could quit my day job and live as a playwright. And I was happy as muck. I wasn't making millions, but then I was getting more and more success. The Army was touring one of my plays to their bases. I had Bruce Beresford was about to direct one of my plays. I had Colin Friel's about to do one, and there was suddenly everybody was going crazy about my plays, and I was very, very happy. And then basically, I think we put on a play for the Chief of Army. We had a suicide prevention play called Marooned, and we were invited to Canberra. We put it on for the Chief of Army and all the chain of command. And they said basically they're going to tour it to all their bases. They were just trying to decide whether to make it voluntary or mandatory for the serving soldiers to see. And I thought, my God, if you say mandatory, I'm a millionaire. And I was just in shock. And then about 2 or 3 days later, they shut down the world with COVID. And I remember thinking, oh, and that was it. And then basically once it was lifted, we managed to tour another play briefly, and then more things were happening. We looked like we were getting back on track. And then they brought in segregation, and I made an announcement on Facebook that my theatre company won't play to segregated audiences, not now, not ever. And I was told by the art world, if you continue to speak out against the narrative, you can forget your career. And that was it. I thought, well, if I don't have the balls to stand by what I believe, what sort of artist am I? I'm just a propaganda artist, or I'm just a decorator. So I instead of staying silent, I set up Cafe Lockdown, or Lockdown then, to defend free speech by refusing to be silent for 1 hour a day. And I've done it every day ever since. And that was it. But there's still some people here and there putting on my plays with their own companies. So there's still some action happening, and there might be more. But that's where I am. But the art world, I mean, there's pages out there of artists, Facebook pages set up just with hate for me, where they just hate my guts. So it's really, really interesting. I've been dismayed by how so few artists have the courage to stand up and question everything that's going on, when I really believe that Not all artists. Some artists are just entertainers, but I think there has to be a healthy section of artists whose job it is to hold up a mirror to society and say, this is who we are and where are we going? And I think that's the job of an artist.
Well, the reason why you have got some dedicated haters now is because cafe lockdown has become such a phenomenon in such a short space of time. And so therefore, if you increase your reach and influence, there's obviously more people committed to tearing you down. I saw Rakshan was trending on Twitter today. One of the former Get Up director, Sally Rugg, had attempted to smear him. I wonder if you'll trend on Twitter one day, you'll get that big. Are you surprised, taken aback about just how it's taken off so much, cafe lockdown?
Do you know what? I got surprised when I was because you're sitting at home and doing it at home, and we've been locked down. You don't really know how many people are watching, and I was surprised when I was at one of the marches that suddenly everyone knew me. And I was really surprised by how popular the show was. And I don't really know what we do because the show is unscripted. You know, obviously, sometimes we don't even know who we're going to have on in the morning. We just hunting around and people turn up to come on the show. Not all the time, but sometimes. And so I don't really know what I'm doing. And it's not like I'm sitting here going, okay, someone said to me the other day, what's your 5-year plan? And I said, to stay out of a death camp. And
5-year plans are for communists.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so that's how it's been. You know, I have the only regular show we have is on Saturday, we have David Thrussell and Richard Wollstonecroft and Damien, and we do a No Goat show, which is basically we just say what the hell we want, and it's very funny, it's very therapeutic, and apart from that, I just post. I have a lot of people send me a lot of sad stories. I post them anonymously, and I'm not so much interested in all the facts that are going on as the human carnage and the human stories within it, and the attack on, like, even these 2 doctors we had on tonight. What amazes me is their only real crime is integrity. They decided to live up to their Hippocratic oath, and as far as APRA is concerned, that's a crime worth being deregistered for. That's the truth. And now the 12-year-old kids that aren't vaccinated are going to be cut out of society, which is, I think, could lead to youth suicides between kids that are already worn out and feel ostracized will now go, I don't want to be a part of this. I think our society has, for a long time now, been walking in the opposite direction from its moral compass, and I'm thoroughly dismayed. I also think too that by speaking up and speaking loudly and getting other people to speak, like yourself, I think it sends ripples of courage out there that, you know, we can still talk, and the only way we can defend free speech is to exercise it. That's it. You know, basically yourself, myself, other people that are out there, Rukshan, other people who are out there speaking against the narrative are like canaries in a coal mine. If we all vanish, then that might be the end of democracy.
I'm a free speech absolutist. I mean, all types of political speech need to be allowed, with the obvious exception of those that directly, immediately incite violence. And we've seen over the past week how the activists on the steps have been demonized, slandered, attacked by Dan, by a few examples of bad behavior, such as obviously the gallows were a bit much, as were the nooses, and was it that clown who was arrested? Well, he wasn't arrested today, but the news was broken today. Arrested for what is it? Incitement to manufacture
the guy with the big
a
gun.
weapon. Yeah,
Mm.
and it's. There's others who've already made this point, but the tactic from Dan and his lackeys and the mainstream media is because of these people, then everyone on the steps it must be dangerous like that.
Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that's the thing, and yet that's what I was saying. It's like the farmer telling the chickens to be scared of the fox, but it's the farmer that's going to eat them. And I see that, like other things that I can't believe Melbournians, like look at this massive march on the weekend. There was somewhere between 70 and 100,000. No one's really sure, unless you're MSN, where there's a few hundred people and a dog. I mean, no one's really sure how many people were there. Yeah, and yet there was no violence, no cars were overturned, no shops were looted, and yet so that's a huge amount of people, and yet Melbourne now owns at least 4 of these Bearcats, these armoured cars, each with their own team of rubber bullet firing, basically paramilitary police officers. You don't need them. We don't need that many. And so you've got to see who is the violent extremist here. Who are the ones? That's why the Shrine was so interesting. They were calling us, who were sitting on the steps, and we'd been shot at all day. I had a rubber bullet injury on my hand, and we'd been shot at all day. And there we were, looking like we were basically sitting on the hill at the Wacker watching the cricket and singing the national anthem. And in front of us, you've got all these stormtroopers with their Tupperware shields and their batons and their rubber bullets and gas canisters ready to attack us. And yet we were the neo-Nazis. I mean, it's extraordinary. And I actually think a lot of people buy it because secretly they're so frightened of what they're seeing in the soldiers that it's easier to hate us because we can't hurt them. And I think that's what people do. I think their survival instinct overrides their morality. And so they publicly hate in order to try reach a place of safety. I think that's what happened with I was reading an essay called The Power and the Powerless, and by the Czechoslovakian playwright. And he was saying that shopkeepers would put in something pro-government in their window simply to make sure the government didn't attack them. And I think initially people were putting that ring around them with I've had the vaccination, just to tell the government, look, I'm a good person. Please don't attack me. Not everybody, but I think there was a lot of that. And I notice you don't see that as much anymore. Now you actually see people who are saying don't comply. And even though they've been vaccinated, I think people can really smell that or sense that we're on the edge of democracy here, and we're in a really dark place, and something has to be done.
The siege at the Shrine, that was during that week of rage when Dan, because the construction workers didn't like his vaccine mandate, ordered the industry be shut for 2 weeks. And that's when, Victoria Police deployed all the toys and gear that they'd been piling up over the years, and deployed them on the street there. And that's where the fake tradie neo-Nazi narrative was born. And what is it? They've mixed in this week QAnon conspiracy theorists, which I have never known anyone who's believed the official QAnon conspiracy theory is that there's this operative in the US government, Q, who says, trust the plan, it's all gonna, so in practice, that's a ludicrous thing. Like, don't worry about anything, there's a plan and Trump's going to prevail. And what happened, he lost,
lost everything.
Yeah.
I think there's always people still like to believe that the cavalry is coming and someone will come and fix it. I wonder if that's why people always say Jesus is going to turn up. Jesus is like the last hope. And maybe he will, but I do feel that there's he's got lousy timing. I had a young man on my show yesterday who I asked him if he was scared if he could end up in a camp, and he had great faith that God is on his side, and it was really beautiful. And I'd love to have that amount of faith. I don't. I do think there's a sort of a spiritual war going on, but between good and evil, really. I think there's a lot of evilness going on. It seems to be almost like a coup has happened in our country, because if an army takes over the government, they take over the media and then all the institutions, and that's what we see. All the institutions have come in speaking the one narrative. And it seems to be the people against the rest. So, but like I said, I don't really know what's going on, and nor do I pretend to. But I do see people looking for the cavalry, and I think the cavalry is us. And I think the huge marches have really had an effect. People say they don't have an effect, but I think they do. I think the QCs have looked at it and they've been moved. The lawyers, the ombudsman, all the rich Jewish families have come out, and I think there's a groundswell of people saying we don't want this bill. But going back to the shrine, so I was at the Westgate. I did the Westgate March, and when we came off the Westgate, all those Port Police were there, ready for a fight, but most of the people just crossed the highway and walked around them. And we really did think that if this amount of people came back the next day and the next day and the next day, then everything was going to be over. And I went in the next day to do the march, and the people weren't there with the numbers. And I was about to go home when I met a small group of young people, most of them new Australians, and they'd come from countries where they knew totalitarianism, and they were saying it had to be stood up against. And we were crossing a park when suddenly this armored vehicle turned up, and they just started firing at us without saying stop or anything. And so we ran, and they were chasing us, but they stopped. And I was stunned. I just couldn't believe it was Australia. And then these young women, I think they were Turkish, said, no, I'm going in. I want to have my say. I want to defend my freedom. And they marched back into the city. And I felt compelled to be with them, because I thought, well, they're fighting for freedom. I can't just go home. So I followed them and kept up with them. And then when we were on Swanston Street, this bear cat turned up again. There was probably about 40 of us. And all these soldiers just jumped off it and were firing. They just opened fire. I got shot in the knuckle. I believe it broke my knuckle. That's about 11 o'clock. And one of the soldiers jumped on a young guy next to me and brought him down, and I just waited for my turn, but it didn't happen. And then I was like bewildered that this was Australia, and I came across a Channel 9 news reporter who was doing a live feed with her cameraman, and I pleaded with her, please, they're shooting the children. Please tell the truth, they're shooting the children. And she was just trembling. I remember seeing her, she just wouldn't look at me. She was just trembling, and she was in shock. And her cameraman was crying. And he was just looking at me, And they never said anything. They never told the truth at all. But they were in shock. We were all in shock. Anyway, then we met. The shooting stopped after that. I don't know why. And we met up with the main crowd, who were just a group of stunned Australians of all different ages, but everyone was stunned. And there was all these young people with injuries, bleeding in the back of their head, just covered in injuries from these rubber bullets. And then we did one circuit around the city, like, what do we do? Because no one knew what to do. And then suddenly someone said, let's go to the shrine. I actually really believe that was a plant, because this guy had a loudspeaker. No one had had a loudspeaker before. Anyway, the police cattled off every street except to the shrine. So if we tried to go any other way, there was just lines of police. You couldn't go through. And then we were able to walk to the shrine without anyone stopping us. And then suddenly we reached the shrine, which gave you a sense of hope, because it was such a symbol of freedom. You thought, well, they're not going to do anything bad to us there. I mean, how could they? And then suddenly they were in front of us, all in their, like I said, Tupperware shields in there. And the negotiation began for about 5 or 6 hours. And I think the main problem was even their spin doctors couldn't figure out how to tell the story where they look like the good guys. And they were telling us, listen, if you guys go, we're going to have to start shooting. They said that for about an hour and a half before they did it. But I truly didn't believe they would just start shooting. I just didn't believe it. And then finally, they, when they were all in front of us, there was some young guys that I was sitting with, and they'd come, young Australians. They picked up all the rubbish and they put it to the side, and then they came and sat with us and linked arms. And I thought they were going to arrest us. I thought they'd just tap us on the shoulder, like, I'm old, grey hair, and go, come on, old man. But instead, it was a full-on assault. And at one point, I was on the ground with an old Italian man, or guy my age really, arms interlinked. And this police officer was bouncing on my head with his shield, going, stop making me do this. Stop making me do this. And I remember guys saying, I don't know if you heard me, I'm not making you do it. And then they finally threw me up and threw me down as handcuffed, as really highly aggressive. And then I was led away. And then when I was being led away, the police officer that was leading me away looked back and then just leaned down to me and whispered, this is not personal. This is not personal. And I said, well, it feels personal. And then it went from there. And but instead of breaking me and breaking all the people that got arrested on that shrine, bar one, are now activists. They go to they actively go to all the marches. They help. Damien and that's when, after that, Damien came on the show. We've been actively doing the show since. Damien was an actor, so he's been ostracized by the acting world. He's now considering going into politics. And so instead of breaking our spirit, it actually defined us. And it's been an extraordinary time. Extraordinary. And it's to say this is a free country in Australia, and it's remarkable.
The police, the Victoria Police, well, especially during the last 6 months, have fallen back on we're just following orders defense. I mean, they don't get a choice about which laws that they get to enforce. We've seen since the lockdown has been lifted, the narrative was always during these anti-lockdown protests during lockdown that the protesters were violent. But since the police have stood back and allowed protests, it's all been peaceful. And so we've seen who the aggressor is. Obviously, after these anti-lockdown protests when the stay-at-home orders were in place, if they didn't get a lot of people on the day, they'd go through the CCTV and body cam footage and go to their places. It was late at night to issue them with a fine. Did you receive any fines or summons?
Yeah, I got a $5,500 fine for the shrine. To date, that's the only one I have. And that was for being, so that I got that one. But at some of the other protests, I kept going to all the protests I could, even though it's a real, there's a few, like I was in Flinders Street when they first opened fire on protesters, the first time that opened fire since the Eureka Stockade, apparently. And I was with the young men. And what really surprised me was, I know they were seen as violent, but the young men were outraged that they had weapons pointed at them. They were just outraged. They were going, "This is Australia. What are you doing? You serve us. What are you doing?" And I think if you were in the protest, what you saw, that what a lot of Australians didn't see, you saw a democracy coming up against totalitarianism that was rising up. Here we are. We're not going to let you be free. We are going to shoot you if you try to defend. Different if you're a Black Lives Matter march or an Extinction Rebellion, something that the government ticks. But if you're against the government, then we're going to try and crush you. And that's what happened at the shrine. Especially, the footage from Rookshan is devastating enough, but Joel Gilmore also has amazing footage of where he's streaming, running away, and you can just see this army pouring over the shrine like a black cancer and down and shooting. When they were shooting, Rookshan got the image of them shooting this side. There were other police on the other side shooting on the other side as well. Then we don't have footage of that. Apparently, there is footage around. One of the CEOs who runs the RSL says there's some other footage around that's so explosive they let it out. But they haven't let it out. So I think that's what we've seen, and this is what with David and Richard and we talk about on Saturday. This is what we've seen: the rise of tyranny, and here it is, and that's what this bill is basically going to make that tyranny law, and that's why I think it's so important to fight against it, just for ourselves and for the next generations. And even if it's just to say that some people tried to stop it, we didn't just, because look at the Greens. I was watching the Green Party do a speech the other day in Parliament, and she just discarded habeas corpus like it was nothing. This is, as my friend Damien pointed out, it's a cornerstone of our society, of our, the whole judicial system. And she just discarded it. It's extraordinary,
I saw on my Facebook feed before we came on air an update from Bernie Finn, who's Liberal Upper House MLC, that the Legislative Council is sitting tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. There could be, as we speak, various negotiations going on with the Andrews government and other crossbenchers who they shut out of the negotiating process. So the bill could still pass, albeit it could be watered down a bit more tomorrow, or it could be adjourned for another couple of weeks until the House sits just before the current state of emergency expires on December 15th. And we're told how horrible it would be if there was no COVID legal framework from December 15 onwards. There would be, no vaccine mandates and passports and mask mandates, the horror.
Yeah. Freedom. Amazing. Yeah. It's I don't know what to say. I think it's going to be very interesting with this march this weekend. This could be even bigger than the march they've just had, because it's a worldwide march. So I don't believe you can ignore this amount of numbers. And if you have the courage to look at the live stream footage from Rukshan or any of them, you can see that it's a totally diverse group marching. I mean, they're from every aspect of Australian culture and every demographic. So, and there's a lot of people from countries, like I've said, that have had authoritarian rule, and they certainly don't want it. I mean, I've been marching with a lot of South African people who don't want apartheid, because they say apartheid is a cancer for the country's soul. Yeah, the country never recovers, even if they get rid of it. The hate that it is, it enshrines, it remains. So if we could get to December the 15th and have everything removed, and we just go back to some form of normality or common sense or critical thinking, or just courage, having the courage to let courage be our navigator instead of fear, it'd be very interesting to see where we are. It's, that's another reason
from tomorrow, there's no public gathering limits either, and the vaccinated and unvaccinated can gather in public, whether it be a park or a beach or on the street. So there can be no shenanigans on Saturday in terms of, this is a unauthorized gathering in excess of what's permitted under the show directions. That's all gone now.
Yeah. So hopefully more people will be free to come. It's a very, very, very interesting, very, very interesting time. It's a very tiring time too for the soul, because people like to know where they're going. Like when I was doing the theatre, I was always knowing where I was going. I had this play on here or this play, and we were looking to try and get another play up or work with someone else. So there was always something you're aiming for. But life now for a long time has been every day as you take it, and your soul is totally fatigued by these ridiculous things coming out, like from New South Wales, where that I don't know if it's true, but there was being shared around, like, the vaccinated can sing and dance, but the unvaccinated have to sit down and be silent. The unvaccinated have to sit down to drink. The vaccinated can stand up. I mean, it's like they all take a load of LSD before they sit down and come up with these rules. And the thing is too, the other thing that's really terrifying is so many of us now know people who've had adverse reactions, especially young men with myocarditis, and people are trying to go, it's only mild, but the doctors that we've had on the show have said, no, it's equivalent of a heart attack. It's a significant thing, and we're just going, oh well, it's. I mean, my wife showed me something today of a guy that got a blood clot and had his leg cut off because of the vaccine. Got a blood clot, had his leg amputated from the knee down. And then apparently when he was in hospital recuperating, he got COVID, and he said, I'm so glad I got the vaccine because I could have got sick from the COVID. So you just think, and you see, it's like Monty Python is in charge of the world. It's just yeah.
Well, all of the people that I know who've got COVID over the past 20 months, because there has been a lot in Melbourne, and I include you as someone I know who's got COVID. They've all got mild cases. Most of them are young men, so of course that they're going to be largely fine. None of them had to go to hospital. Of course, it wasn't pleasant to be coughing and have a blocked nose, sore throat, that sort of thing. But they all made a full recovery. There was none of this, what is that, long COVID that we're constantly told about. If you have any more health issues for the rest of your life, it'll be, people will say the long COVID, fearmongers will say it's because of long COVID. If you stub your toe, it's long COVID.
Yeah, obviously, your balance was out. You didn't see it. At the moment, I know several people who are sick with it. So I think it's probably going to spread through the community like wildfire now. I mean, they're having thousands of cases now. We locked down initially. Last time we locked down was because they had 1 or 2 cases in the morning, and then they were locked down by the afternoon. And, we were all waiting, please just don't make it more than 2, he'll shut us down. Then it was like 4 cases, okay, we shut down. Then he brought in the curfew because those young people were out there drinking, wanting to have a life. And the other thing too, which is, I think living in fear is counterproductive to the human's soul. I mean, if we always bowed down to fear, we would have never left the caves. And so I think we're used to being risk takers and able to different levels. I mean, some people are massive risk takers, like that guy that climbed that face of some mountain without any ropes. He's an extreme risk taker, down to people who are just terrified if anyone is in a mile of them without a mask. But at the moment, I have a joke at the moment that the meek have inherited the world by force, and we're all having to live in their prison now. And I'm hungry to get back to being able to ride my motorbike. Even like when the lockdown, one of the first lockdowns finished, my friend and I rode our motorbikes to Sydney on the back roads just to be free. It was fantastic. At one point, we took our helmets off on these back roads and we're just riding. My bike looks like an Uber Eats delivery bike, so I don't even have a bike that's built for it. But it was just to be free, and I sorely miss that.
I went on a road trip on the weekend, and it's just even though it was a long drive to where I was going, it was just good to just go on a road trip, travel 100+ kilometers, and get out and explore. Like, just there's so much, like, we've been trapped in this prison colony, but when Australia was one nation briefly earlier this year, still so much beauty, natural beauty in this one nation that you could enjoy. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Living life is full of risks. I mean, it was risky for me to drive that long, especially with all these people on the road who've forgotten how to drive during lockdown, and also forgotten.
That's right. He's driven 100 k's. That's right. But it's exhilarating. I love to drive up into the snowy mountains, even if it's not the snow. It's that World Curvy Road. I just love that drive. Look at the Great Ocean Road. The Great Ocean Road has always been a dangerous road to drive, but it's exhilarating too for the views you see. Same with people who take parachute jumps, or people who go up in balloons.
Oh, you just audio. Just all of a sudden, there just went a bit haywire.
Oh, sorry. Or the people the people who do hookups on Tinder and go meet someone in a cafe, and suddenly they're off somewhere in some hotel room bonking, with someone they don't know. I mean, it's risk. It's the sugar of life, And it's, yeah. I also don't believe that the old people who were supposed to be protecting, because the thing that made me realize early on something was amiss was when they said they're doing this to protect the old people. And just before this happened, they'd had a royal commission in the nursing homes, which clearly showed the government didn't give a flying fuck about old people at all. They didn't care at all because there was so much mismanagement and abuse. And then suddenly, basically, we're vaccinating 5-year-olds to protect old people. And I believe if you ask these old people if they want that to happen, I reckon 99% of them would say no. So at the moment, everything's bullshit.
Well, the St. Basil's coronial inquest is taking place at the moment. That's where 50 aged care residents at that facility died with COVID, and it's horrific to hear what's coming out, that a lot of them died of neglect because a lot of the staff who knew them and what they needed were stood down because they had COVID. And this is also one of the most heartbreaking things about the pandemic. I feel so sorry for the small business owners, the children, and also the elderly who some of them are forced to live their twilight years in isolation, die not with their family by their side, but in a room of faceless strangers, and then their family, only 10 people are allowed at their funeral.
Yeah, and one thing too, I think I mentioned this to Richard. One of the ways archaeologists decide if any sort of race they find is civilized is how they bury the dead. So funerals are a huge part of our culture. Look at the pyramids, forever. You know, this is it. So to have these 10 people at a funeral, everyone isolated, it's, yeah. I wish I had more.
When you recover from the virus, provided that any time in the next few days, you don't suddenly gasp for air on a ventilator, you'll have natural immunity to the virus, which also the Melbourne private detective, he got COVID, was in hospital for a couple of days, but they gave him some wonder drugs and he was fine. But this is the message that he got from the Victorian Health Department today, which probably you'll get. We hope that you have recovered from your recent COVID-19 diagnosis. If you have not received 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine, you can get vaccinated as soon as you feel well. This will help protect you from getting COVID-19 again. If you have any questions, please speak with your GP or visit coronavirus.vic.gov.au/vaccine. Thank you for keeping Victoria safe.
I've actually had that conversation. They told me on the phone, the girl said, "Oh, it's good you've got it. You're gonna natural immunity now. You can get the 6-month exemption. Oh, except of course, if you want your civil liberties back, you'll have to get the passport." And then a doctor called me up, and I said to him, "How do I get this 6 months exemption?" He said, "What do you want that for?" I said, "Because I've got natural immunity. It's 13 times better than the vaccine, and I'd like to have it." And he goes, "Oh, they won't give it to you." He says the board won't allow it. Only under extreme cases. So they just want to get this shit into your system.
Well, in other Western nations, some of them have with their green pass. It's either you have to show proof you've been vaccinated or proof of natural immunity or a negative COVID test. In my opinion, all of those requirements should be gotten rid of if we're going back to normal. But in Australia, there is no negative test or natural immunity option. They want you to get the jab.
Yeah, even though like Gibraltar, where they got 118%, and they're all closing down again because they're all getting sick. So same in Israel. And the doctor tonight, that the show didn't work, but he was saying the booster shots aren't working. And
I've looked into it myself. The the narrative that I'm observing off the surface level, Israel's curve is flat again since they rolled out the boosters, but in the mainland European continent, where they haven't rolled out the boosters, such as the Netherlands, Austria, Denmark, and as an island, they've only rolled out the boosters for the really old and severely immunocompromised. And so, given that the boosters worked in Israel, you can guarantee that they want to keep the vaccinated economy here, including probably in Victoria and New South Wales, because we had the Deputy Liberal New South Wales leader Stuart Ayres saying to keep being employed and going to your pub, get your 6 monthly booster dose. And that's why Dan wants to keep the vaccinated economy throughout 2022, because they are going to mandate them if they've worked in Israel, and mainland Europe is having a new wave. But it's interesting, the UK, which is apparently Plague Island, because they got rid of all restrictions earlier this year. Their cases, they continue to fluctuate between 30 and 50,000, but they've never risen exponentially. And the Johnson government seems to be holding its nerve against the doomsday scientists and media, and not even going to their plan B, which is reintroducing masks, work from home, vaccine passports. They seem to be now following Sweden and the United States and Canada. They're not experiencing a winter resurgence either.
I don't know much about Canada. I only hear secondhand. I know in England, I've heard of there's a lot of people working over there who are not vaccinated. Portugal, I talked to a guy in Portugal, and he said it's very liberal there. The vaccinated and the unvaccinated work together. No one talks about it. It's very much, if you want it, take it. If you don't. So there's different countries doing different things. We try to actually get people on the show who are actually on the ground, who rather than trying to get people from mainstream media, because it's very hard to know whether the mainstream media is telling the truth, and especially ours.
The mainstream media, I mean, they still want to be invited to Dan's press conferences, get the leaks late at night for the exclusives on the front page. So they're going to follow the narrative, and the 6 p.m. news in Melbourne for the past 2 years has been non-stop fear porn. Like, what is it? Whenever there's a spike in cases or death, it says the deadliest day of pandemic since this day, or the largest rise in cases since this day. That's how they always lead.
Yeah.
But there's so much independent media now, including just in Melbourne. I mean, with the Occupy Spring Street, there's at least one independent journalist filming at any one time, whether it's
that's right.
Ruckshan, whether it's Joel Gilmore, whether it's
Tammy Jane, and I share their things, and it's constantly going. There's a guy setting up an independent Australian free independent press network in Sydney, and I think people. It'd be interesting to see, because I know the project got axed today. So I think it's
axed because there's been rumors.
I think it did. I saw something. Look, don't take my word for it. Just something came on.
Obviously, I'll be excited. Yeah, if it is. I mean, Lisa Wilkinson will go from $2 million to $0.
Yeah. So, but I saw, and I think most people can smell bullshit, and they're over it. They're wanting common sense, and we don't even pretend that we're a news show. I'm not a news show. I actually just see us as a community, and that's all I do. So I don't try to even pretend to be news show. We just get on people who interest us and try talk and start discussions and just try to form a community. So it's the show surprises me with its popularity, to be honest.
You had over 100 people. I tuned into the YouTube stream. You always stream to YouTube and Facebook. There was well over 100 watching on YouTube, and YouTube viewers are always lower than Facebook. So it's streamed every weeknight on Facebook and YouTube. Was it 7:30 p.m.? No,
we actually before we had interviewed 2 priests recently. That was about 2 weeks ago, and 2 Catholic priests, and that was when we had a previous YouTube channel that had I think we got 5,000 or 6,000 subscribers within a month or something, and we were having huge YouTube numbers, of people watching it, but YouTube basically shut down the whole channel for these priests, and so they didn't like what they're saying. They've never brought it back. We put in an appeal. They ignored it, and
that's
so
the time.
We've just set up a new YouTube channel last week, I think, that's
the one I was watching.
Yeah. So that's going to about 500 subscribers now. So it's just growing. Rumble is we've just hit 1,000 subscribers there, but the thing that surprises us is Facebook leaves us alone, and I think the last time I checked, we're heading towards 45,000 followers, and it really surprises me. And we don't do any marketing at all. We don't do any boosts or anything, which I used to do when I had the theatre company. I was constantly spending money on boosts, trying to get people to turn up to the plays.
And
we don't do any of that now. No, so it's really, really, really interesting, and I just I don't understand why it's so popular. I'm grateful for it because it gives my life some purpose. Because if it wasn't for it, I don't know what I'd be doing. Probably going bounding off the walls, and then next thing is when they let us out. Is heading back to the marches. But I think next week, once we get out, there's a lot of country people who want us to come to the country to do shows live from the country, which is really interesting because we can't stay in hotels. We can't go to restaurants. Basically, we can just buy fuel. And so we're going to have to be a community show. People are going to have to...
I think reading the restrictions that you are allowed to stay in a hotel, but you're not allowed to use the shared facilities like the pool, for example. I think.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So I can stay in a hotel, but I can't use the shared facilities.
There's that the new restrictions. What did it say? Travel. It says we strongly recommend that people staying in accommodation venues in Victoria and hotels and Airbnb are fully vaccinated. Vaccinated requirements still apply to the relevant settings within the accommodations, such as a restaurant or a gym. So,
okay,
that was the sheet of paper that Dan issued today, which comes into effect at 11:59 p.m. tonight. Tomorrow is my birthday, so Dan, so thoughtful of him to lift most of the restrictions and abolish gathering limits on my birthday. What a thoughtful man who just did for my birthday.
Yeah. Maybe it's all to do with you, thinking of you.
Well, I can have a huge house party tomorrow night if I want to, with unlimited people, as many can fit here. But I won't be doing that because I'll be back tomorrow night 6 p.m. for Trad Tasman Talk on the Unshackled YouTube channel, 6 p.m. Melbourne time, with Dewey DeBoer from Auckland. And what is that? I'm not sure you've been following in New Zealand, but what is it? Auckland is in their 14th week of their, alert level 3, or the city being locked down in stay-at-home orders. And remember, Jacinda Ardern in August, she went even harder than Dan, locked down the whole country over one mystery case, including shutting takeaway, so no McDonald's or KFC either, yet they're getting around about 200 cases a day still. And she's moving Auckland at the end of the month to this horrendous traffic light system, which she still wants to suppress the virus. So Auckland will be at the red COVID protection framework, and the rest of the country will be at amber green. And so imagine running a business in New Zealand, because the density limits vaccine passport change at green, amber, and red. It's going to be a nightmare for those businesses down over the Tasman.
That's insane. It's
no word on international travel to and from New Zealand. I mean, you can escape the country if you wish now. Can go to free state of Florida or Texas or Sweden.
Afghanistan, I think, is probably going to be one of the freest countries. Grab your Kalashnikov and get your little hut with your goat and say F off to anyone who wants to come and teach me how to live. Give me rules.
That was a famous meme during the Melbourne lockdown. The Taliban saying, "Look, if you don't like it here, go to Melbourne."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. I did sort of have a script for tonight, but because the conversation flowed so naturally as your shows do, I didn't go out the window completely. I still covered all the points that I wanted to with you, but it was a free-flowing conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks. It was nice.
And I encourage
your birthday.
Thank you. And I'd encourage everyone to check in and watch Cafe Locked Out every weeknight, 7:30 p.m. and Saturdays 8 p.m. Because it's certainly not worth watching Sky News now, since they cancelled Alan Jones. So there's so much independent media now that you shouldn't need to watch any mainstream media or any controlled opposition ever again.
Yeah. It's coup d'etat. We're taking over. Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who watched on the WilmsFront YouTube channel, and also the Unshackled Facebook page. Had quite a good Facebook audience as well. And like I said, I'll be back tomorrow night for Trad Tasman Talk, and of course covering the Worldwide Freedom Day in Melbourne on Saturday afternoon as well. Take care, everyone. I wish you a speedy recovery from being an active case, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.